and welcome to this virtual worship space with St. Paul's United Church in Paris, Ontario. My name is Reverend Sarah Grady, and if you are joining us for the first time today, you are so welcome in this space. If you come here often, hello, it's always lovely to be seen and to see you. As we gather, we know that we are on traditional and sacred land in Paris. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. And we continue in the year 2022 to work through the hard times, the challenges, the struggles that truth and reconciliation and healing bring with it. And so we continue that on in this acknowledgement. Just a couple of announcements for our community as we enter into this time. A reminder for folks about our annual meeting, our annual reports. So if you are in charge of a committee or a group and owe a report, those are due by this coming Thursday. The second thing is we are doing an online silent auction. The items that we're looking for are noted in the e-blast. So if you have something to donate, a talent, an item that you've made or that you have that you think could help out with our silent auction, please be in touch with Karen. She's taking care of all of that for us. The last thing is we are in our second Sunday of our sermon series, and today we welcome the Reverend Doug Peck, who is the minister at Chalmers United Church in Kintore and St. Andrew's United Church in Brooksdale, and he is going to be offering us a sermon on Veronica, the Bleeding Woman, and he is joined by his partner Jessica, who is doing the monologue from our chapter this week. So we are so grateful for their message and for their offering this day. As we gather wherever we are, no matter whether we are in the same room or we are meeting this way by YouTube, and we are meeting at a time other than our usual allotted 10:30 a.m. Sunday morning time, we know we are connected by the one who called himself the light of the world. Jesus said long ago, "I am the light of the world, and whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." I've gone ahead and lit a candle here to represent the light of Jesus Christ. If you have one around, I invite you to go ahead and light that now, reminding us that we walk in this light today and always. And as we worship with song and prayer and heart this day, may it connect us and illuminate our faith in this gathering. Let us pray. Holy One, open our hearts and our minds and our spirit to your presence as we worship this day. Open us to fresh possibilities, to deeper understanding, to new ways of thinking, and to transformation. Unsettle our complacency and move us to action in the name of Jesus Christ, that one who taught us to be people of compassion, to be people who seek justice, and to be people who love as we are loved. These things we lift up to you in the name of Jesus Christ, who taught us to pray, saying, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen." Time Let us pray. Open our hearts to the mystery of your word, Holy God, and open our spirits to its meaning for our lives. Be with us as we listen for and receive your word this day. Amen. Our chapter this week is Veronica, the Bleeding Woman, and this is based on the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, verses 25 to 34. In the New Revised Standard Version, or translation, it says, "Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, 'If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well.' Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease, and immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, 'Who touched my clothes?' And his disciples said to him, 'You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear, and trembling fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Veronica, the Bleeding Woman. There is within the Catholic tradition a Saint Veronica. She's a pious woman of Jerusalem in the 1st century who was healed by touching the hem of Jesus' garment. There's another story that says a woman named Veronica followed Christ to the cross and gave him her veil to wipe his face as he carried his cross. It was said to bear the likeness of his face. This scene is the 6th station on the Via Dolorosa. If we assume this is the same woman, a story of devotion comes to light. I could think of nothing else to do. It was a great risk to do what I had planned, but I was desperate. I had been bleeding, as a woman does monthly, but for 12 years. It began at a time when I first started my womanly courses. There were a few days when I was not bleeding, but that was of no account. The law said that I remained ritually unclean for 7 days after the bleeding stopped. Under this law, I was unclean all the time. That made my life unbearable. I lived with my parents, but when this bleeding continued, they found it very hard and tragic. The rules made it impossible to have me in their house. These laws of impurity shut me away from real contact for most of my days. No one could sit on a stool on which I had been sitting, so I had my own stool. I had my own dishes and spoon, a bowl in which to wash. I washed my own clothes, bed linens, everything, for no one could touch anything that I had touched. If they did, they too would become unclean until the evening of the same day. They could not touch me either. I was never hugged. No one could brush my hair, lace my garments, hold my hand. My parents could not live like this, and so they turned me out and found me a tiny space in which to stay. They came to see me and to give me money so that I could live. But we talked through the doorway, and they never came into my little house, which was just a room with a door and one window. Life was barren, cold, empty. I tried the doctors, and all that did was make me poor. They could not help me. How could they when they wouldn't get near me or touch me? They told me to drink this tea or that potion or use this salve. Nothing changed. I had to do something or I would die of a broken heart. I had heard of the healer called Jesus, and I was determined to find him. But then what? I thought about it for a long time and finally decided on a plan. I would dress very plainly and hide my face. Hardly anyone knew me, but I didn't want to risk being seen or recognized. I would quietly come up to him from behind and touch his garment. I knew that he was a man of God, and surely God would come to my aid. As I looked to the hills and prayed, I felt at peace, and when Jesus came near my place, I was ready. I dressed with care and slipped away in the early hours of the day to go to the place where he was to come and teach. When he arrived, I knew him at once. There was such strength in his walk, such power in his face, such gentleness in his voice and compassion in his look. I was at the edge of the crowd, but slowly worked my way nearer to him, being very careful not to touch anyone. As he turned to face the great mass of people, I reached out and touched the hem of his robe. At once, I felt a peace and a strength that I had not known for years. He spoke. "Who touched me?" The disciple scoffed, but I knew that he had felt my presence. I threw myself at his feet and confessed. He smiled at me and said that my belief had been the source of my healing. "Go in peace, daughter," he said in blessing. I decided that I would follow him and learn more about him and his teaching. And I did, listening and learning and helping the women disciples when I could. And I was there when he was arrested. I followed the jeering crowd as he carried his cross along the streets to the hill of crucifixion. He stumbled, and I could see the blood and tears on his face. I gave him a piece of clean cloth, and he wiped his brow. As he handed it back, he smiled and said, "Thank you, daughter." He knew me. I could tell. He remembered it once, and once again I received his blessing. In spite of the horror of that time, once again I felt at peace.
Let us pray. Holy One, may the words that come from my mouth and the meditations that are stirred in all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our strength and our sustainer. Amen. I would like to ask all of you to please be kind to me as I tell a bit of an embarrassing story. It's about the first time I was given a list of things to buy from my wife at the drugstore. I was told to go to the drugstore, small list, things that we needed for our house. And when I read the list, I realized there was something on that list that I had never, ever purchased before from the drugstore. It was something that my wife needs, all women need, once every month. This is something that they need. And seeing that, and that I'd never, ever bought it before, there was this teenage boy inside of me that got a little squeamish, being the first time I had ever purchased these things. That I thought to myself, well, how do I do this? What's the mannerisms I need to carry? How do I go about doing this? And that time in the drugstore was different than any other times before, and I had to have this adrenaline going, and I had to be focused and buy things and be grown up and just go to the checkout and give my credit card, and I got a receipt. And there was this moment where I thought, I did it, and maybe I could even do it again. Maybe some people might even call me a hero. But probably those people would be seen as pathetic for saying such things. Because if we were to compare my experience to Veronica's experience, there's just no comparison. And I do think Veronica should be called a hero. And there's so many reasons, and I want to get more into that very, very soon. But first, I want to talk about her experience and what suffering she has been under because of it. So for her, menstruation begins. The only problem is it doesn't stop. Well, it did stop for 3 days, as we heard. But the purity code, as we heard about in the chapter, and She Said by Betty Radford Turcotte, lets us know that by purity code standards, you're unclean, you're impure for 7 days after. And so she never became officially unclean. This affected her within her family in a drastic way. It meant that she could never stop being distant from her family. using different things. It got to the point where she needed her own bowl, her own stool, her own utensils, her own everything. And she needed to do everything for herself. This became so exhausting for her family that they needed to just get her a different place. Right? There's heartache in this, isn't there? Thinking, didn't they love her? But after we've been through a pandemic, and many of us have had to undergo this kind of isolation from our own families, to live up to the health codes that we have been doing. My goodness, we're not even in the same sanctuary together right now. And it's not necessarily because we don't love each other. It's because we genuinely believe that we are behaving in the right way to do all this. Veronica, respecting her family, respecting her community and her ways, continues to carry through with these rules, even though it has made her so distant and so poor. She can't make her own living. Her parents have to deliver everything, deliver her money even. And all that has been wasted to doctors who help not at all. They help by not even getting close to her, by not even understanding what the real problem is, by saying, buy this tea, buy this salve. None of it works. She is completely desperate and has no idea what to do. And she's been living this way for 12 years. 12 years. And as much as she respects the laws and the codes, it has become utterly exhausting. Her suffering is great. And maybe some of us haven't suffered to her extent. We have suffered in some way. And I'm going to ask us to just keep that in mind and in the back of our heads and in the back of our hearts. Brene Brown, a PhD social worker and a shame expert, shame and vulnerability expert, she calls what Veronica is going through a day 2 experience. And she talks about this notion, day 2, in her books and on one of her podcasts that I'll post on social media. I just want everybody to listen to this. It's pretty wonderful. But day 2 for her speaks of a training session that her and her colleagues used to run to teach other therapists about shame and how to help other people process their shame as therapists and counselors. And she says, on day 1, you're getting used to the information, you're getting an overview of things. But on day 2, all of a sudden, you're applying it in real deep ways. And you're asking people to dig deep and look into a really difficult topic like shame and vulnerability. And then day 3, you get the certificate, everybody's happy. But day 2, she says, it's messy and there's no other way for it to be anything but messy. Day 2, she gets evaluations back of how the training went. And everybody says, loved the course, but man, day 2 was horrible. And you got to make it easier for us. Could you make day 2 easier? And she laughs about this because day 2 is a messy thing in this kind of training. She compares it to the Air Force, and the Air Force has this expression that you're up in the air and you've gone so far that you can't turn around and come back. You don't have the fuel for that. There's a certain point of no return, very literally, where you have to keep going forward. Day 2 is a process where you can't just go back and be safe. You have to keep going forward. And she even talks about how Pixar in their movie making. Pixar, the animated movie company, in their movie making process, this is what they acknowledge as Act 2 in their movie making. In a 3-act movie, Act 1, you set things up. You set up the world, you set up the characters, you set up the potential problems that are going to arise. And that happens at the end of Act 1. Act 2 is when the main character starts to have to deal with this process. So what do we do when we want to stay so comfortable and safe? We figure out every single safe way to solve the problem without getting too mucky or messy. But every option is exhausted. And the main character hits this point where they realize none of these things are working. And by the end of Act 2, always for this story writing process, the main character realizes there is no way I can solve my problem without being vulnerable. Without being vulnerable. Without risking something so great, realizing I can't do this on my own. I can't hide my problems away. I've got to let this messiness get a little worse before it's going to get better. I think we really understand this on a human level. And this is a point that becomes bizarrely beautiful for Brené Brown, because she says it's in that day 2 space where we learn about ourselves. And when we learn in a very deep way that makes us grow in a very big way. Now, first, I want us to think about who we're vulnerable with and who's vulnerable with us. I remember a friend once saying something so insightful to me. We were talking about someone else, and this friend was a little frustrated. They were saying, you know, I think we could be better friends if only he were vulnerable. He's never vulnerable. And as sad as my friend was, it's a powerful point, because you think about your best of relationships and who you are with them and who they are with you. And laughter and joy is always a part of that. But I think something even greater is that vulnerability is a part of that. There's somebody you can be vulnerable with, and there's someone who trusts you, that they can be vulnerable with you. How endearing is that? If you think about that person for a moment, how endearing is that if someone can be vulnerable and chooses you to be vulnerable around? How trusted do you feel? How much closer do you feel to that person for being vulnerable? I also, and this is all going in the direction of, as Brené Brown says, and as the Pixar model shows it, of being a hero. That Act 3 is taking that vulnerability and making it a part of the hero's journey that we've heard about before. And I want you to think about some of the heroes that you have, and how vulnerability is a part of what makes them so heroic. And for me, my own congregation will remember about a year ago in March, I suffered a concussion. I was so excited for winter to be over. I wanted us to have play equipment again in my yard, because if we're going to be isolated more and more and more, I wanted the play equipment to be up and running. There was a swing set all over the place, and who knows what else was dismantled, all because I wanted to make an ice rink in a certain place. And putting up this swing set again led me to bonking my head with a 4x4, and man, it hurt. And there was a concussion that followed. And the instinct with concussion sometimes, right, is that, oh, come on, just tough this out. Come on, just keep going. And I'm so thankful to one of our worship committee members that just said, Doug, that is the dumbest thing you could do. Just take the time that you need to heal and be vulnerable. And I'm grateful for that wisdom, but I'm also grateful for the vulnerability of someone like Sidney Crosby, who has shown the world that he's not going to mess with certain things like that. Yeah, he's big and strong and athletic and capable and powerful, but he's not afraid to just take the time and go against the culture that says tough it out. That for him to get back to that hero standard that he is to so many people, it's about letting his body be in a place where he's vulnerable. That was strong for me. Someone else that I'm thinking about right now is Selena Gomez. She has required a new kidney because of lupus. Kidney disease became a part of her story. And a lot of you know this is powerful for me because my brother is in a similar situation. Kidney disease has landed him in a place where he requires dialysis, and it's frustrating. He doesn't like dialysis. It doesn't agree with him. He is without energy, without a job. He's frustrated by this. And here, Selena Gomez is this living proof of the powerful journey that is getting a new kidney. And she's very open about this. She's very vulnerable with this story. She's very appreciative of her friend, Francia Raitza, who said, I'll donate a kidney to you. And together they show their scars. They tell their story. They talk about how scary it was. But they're talking about it from a place where they are strong and okay. And what a place of hope it brings me to. I almost feel like writing Sidney Crosby and Selena Gomez a fan mail from a 42-year-old guy saying, thank you for your vulnerability. Maybe that would be weird to them. I don't know. But their vulnerability is heroic to me. And that is exactly why Veronica is the hero that she is. She's at the end of day 2. She's at the end of act 2. She's saying, forget this. I am done with being ashamed. This is my life. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And I've heard of one who heals. And she has accepted that she can't do it by all these other means that have just not worked. She's ready to throw a Hail Mary. She finds Jesus in the crowd. She doesn't care that there's people everywhere that might consider her unclean. She respectively stays away from breaking any kind of rules by touching them, but she gets close enough to touch the hem of Jesus's robe and does so. And right away, Jesus says, who did that? Saying to the disciples, who touched my robe? Feeling the power leave his body. The disciples are like, come on, Jesus, how could you begin to even try to think about whose robe got touched here? Jesus isn't frustrated and wanting to discover to chastise anybody. Jesus is aware that there is a hero amongst this crowd who realizes where the power is, how to draw closer to God's divine self, how to find saving from the one we call Savior. And her, still in a place of deep vulnerability, admits and confesses the most vulnerable time of all, and Christ in front of everybody points this out and says, this is faith, everyone. This is what I want everyone to understand faith to be. It's almost like a coach saying, everybody, be more like that. Everybody, when you're learning how to stop in hockey, you hear that noise, you hear that sound. It's coming from that. Be like that person. Modeling it for everyone to see. And a couple of my favorite theologians, they have this podcast. Caroline Lewis, who loves the miracle stories. Gospel of John is filled with miracle stories. But her colleague who does the podcast with her at Luther Seminary Theological School in St. Paul, Minnesota, Rolf Jacobson, he is a double amputee himself from a cancer surgery in 2000 when he was a teenager. And he says, healing stories like this are problematic for people in the disability community. Because sometimes we hear a message that have faith and you'll get better magically. But today, that's not what this is about. This is a conversation between God and us about shame being hard. It is our cross. But it's not the end. And it's in that process of walking through it, though we want to hide from it and hide from everyone else, that we're being asked to trust and reach out and see a God that takes our hand and brings us closer in relationship when we display our vulnerability to God. God finds that so endearing. And we're told about an Easter morning, arising beyond all suffering, which is the true blessing meant for each and every one of us, and requires that hero moment in Act 3, where we realize the strength for us is also a part of our own accepting of being weakness, but like Veronica, drawing upon the strength of our God and our Savior. Amen.
And now we offer prayers for God's people and God's world and a blessing on the gifts offered to the mission work of God's church. Let us pray. Holy One, bless the gifts of time and talent, of treasure and presence that are offered to this place for the mission work of your church. Help us to use these gifts to show love, peace, hope, and compassion in the places they are needed most. Gracious Creator, we lift up our prayers to you this day in confidence, for this world in which we live is your world. You are here among us, and you brought into being your love for all your people. As we lay down our burdens and our fears and our hopes before you, we know that you are waiting to hear us and to respond in love. We pray that you will teach us all how to provide for our own lives, mindful of our own needs, yet also of the call of Christ to love our neighbor as ourselves. We pray that you would help us to make St. Paul's United Church a place of generosity, a place where people work together, offering the gifts they possess, those ones we spoke of time and talent, treasure or presence, so that the wonderful resources of our world and of ourselves may be better shared. Loving Creator, we pray today for people who wander through life constantly seeking a purpose and a reason for living. And we remember too those who store up wealth for themselves, believing that the road to happiness is through the accumulation of things. Help them to find in you love, acceptance, wholeness, and a generosity. We pray your healing touch be upon all those who are grieving and all who are ill, those who are recovering. And we especially lift up prayers for all in your world, those known to us and those in places where we can't even imagine the uncertainty and the fear. We pray for frontline workers all around this world who are beyond weary, for the nurses and doctors, EMTs and support staff, and so many other healthcare providers and hospital staff who have carried much of the burden of this pandemic. Hold them close and strengthen them for the continued work of healing and caregiving. We lift up prayers for unrest in Russia and Ukraine. Help our words of prayer turn into action, to know the right things to do and to say, and to help those in leadership to see the work for the common good. We lift up these prayers that are part of our common life. We lift up this worship and this service to you, that one who hears the prayers that we speak out loud and the prayers that are too deep for words. And we give them over to you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, and say amen. Every fear. friends, brothers and sisters in Christ, may you go now to God's waiting world with open hearts, open hands, and open minds. May you go now to seek out opportunities to be healers and to be healed. And as you go, know that the light of God and the light of Jesus Christ goes with you wherever you go. May you go to shine that out into the world. Let us go now in hope, in faith, and in peace. And as our worship ends, may our service begin. Amen.